The ways that people break into being a product manager, ways that people break into product.
There we go. Yeah, there's plenty of different ways, right? You think about anybody who's in the product space, how did they get in? Think about that. Maybe the company brought somebody fresh in from outside, or they promoted from within, somebody who's been within the organization in a given domain, so to speak, whether it's technology or business. And it can range the whole spectrum, right?
Or they've hired someone straight out of college.
That doesn't happen, right?
No, it certainly happens. Those are the three ways, and here we are. Stormy, that is the reason I was like, we gotta talk to Stormy on the podcast, because we have polar opposites of the way we got into. We're both in product, both product managers, and we have polar opposites. I came up through development teams. I started in QA, and I worked up through development teams, and I came into product ownership / management. And you did not come through the technical teams.
I did not even remotely. So I'm actually a registered nurse. And the first half of my career, I spent in an ICU at a bedside working with patients. I also was somebody who was not afraid to disassemble a laptop and put it back together, which was one of the things that ended up landing me a job in the IT department at the hospital I was working at. Essentially, they wanted someone who was comfortable enough to learn and not be intimidated by hardware and IT in general, and someone that could walk the talk in regards to healthcare.
Yeah.
This was at the transition or the beginning of the Affordable Care Act, and really getting providers, physicians involved, trained, and bought into using an electronic medical records system. And so I became the face of IT for a hospital, and that was my big break into IT. Yeah. It was a few years later before I actually got into product, and that was a whole nother big accident. But that happened. Developing a care management application said, you know what, we've got multiple product owners. We are building this care management utilization managed application ground up. We have multiple product owners, and we really want someone in here who can, again, walk the talk in regards to the people that we are trying to serve. And that's how I ended up getting that role and breaking into product. So I came in with little more than just a little bit of knowledge of nomenclature in regards to Agile, and otherwise no experience in product, and worked in, to date, the most healthy and productive Agile environment I have ever worked in.
That's interesting. So your background as a nurse, I mean, you started off client-facing, right? You were there in the ICU, right, with your client. So you kind of understood their pain points, literally in this case. But that's important because you're bringing that knowledge to the technology world when you become a product person, a product owner, product manager, right? I feel like in that third instance that we quickly glossed over, somebody coming in fresh from school, they lack that. They may have the theoretical knowledge of what product marketing or even just marketing is all about. I don't think there's product ownership that's being taught in schools. It's product marketing. And so when they come in, they're keen to practice the theory they learned, but they don't have the connection with the end user.
Yeah.
And without that, I feel like you're off to a rocky start in product management or product ownership.
Let me see if I can. People straight out of college, if we're going to go with the third category, the one that I know the least about, and I'm going to support them as an argument on arguing Agile. Here we go. I would say the advantage of people who don't know anything about either the domain or how dev teams work is we can train them from scratch.
Sure.
We can train them from the ground up, and they don't have any bad habits.
Oh, I want to teach them your own bad habits.
I want to say bad habits, but I also want to go on a tangent about like Enterprise Agile Coach Ohm, like, hey, give me a Gantt chart about how long it's going to take to apply this software, and Enterprise Agile Coach will say, I'm not giving you a Gantt chart because That is not something that you do in Agile development. Like,
That's
there's no
correct.
reason to do that. Like, these people will do that because they don't really know any better to do that. So I can get people that won't really challenge my assumption, way of doing business. I don't know what to call it. Assumptions.
They
way of
don't
doing
have
business.
a way of doing business. This is, I'm assuming here, but this might be their first job out of college, maybe, or out of business school or something. So you're right. They don't have the baggage. But when they get into an organization, they learn the organization's quote unquote bad practices as well, right? Because they don't know any better. And that's the bottom line. They don't have something to bring to the table when it comes to experience of having seen it a couple of different ways. And that's where in either of the other two cases, whether one enters the field from a technical perspective, you did, or from a SME angle that you did, in both cases, you have something you can bring, right? And both are valid approaches, I feel. It's just that I think you have to be very open-minded about what it is that you don't know. Where are your weak points, right? And you need to be actively addressing those, because most organizations do not do a good job of redressing that deficiency in anybody. And I mean that word in the best possible way. It's not that you're deficient, it's just that you're not well-rounded just yet.
If I want to argue this point and try to actually argue it, right? The interesting point about someone who doesn't have domain expertise nor expertise on development teams maybe could be that they come with no preconceived notions, right? So they're going to question everything. That would be the best case scenario. They're learning the best of everything because they don't know anything, right? I'm going to assume that they're getting active mentorship from the organization. They're getting resources. They're being given a framework where they can take the best of everything they're seeing and run with that. Hey, how do I decide what the best thing to do next would be? Well, I gather some evidence, I talk to customers, and I decide. And they know that's a general framework, but they're being guided by principle rather than being guided by, I don't know, past experiences. They don't have anything to anchor on that will anchor their judgment on. Whereas someone who has domain expertise might say like, well, I don't want to go down that road, or I don't want to make that kind of feature, or I don't want to serve this kind of customer because there's no money there, or maybe that customer already has a great product for this and they'll never buy our stuff, or maybe whatever.
Right.
They won't anchor on anything. They won't grasp on anything because they don't know anything.
Which is good and bad, right? It's good and bad. So your assumption that the organization gives all the support that's needed to this person that's coming in, you could challenge the assumption there. There aren't many that do that because the organization immediately wants that person to be productive rather than nurture them for any length of time. Other than the initial induction called onboarding, you're supposed to hit the ground running.
Sorry. I was in my ideal organization in the sky. They weren't like every week they're like, you're not productive yet.
Right.
Like why are you not productive yet? That wasn't happening. They realized that you're new. They were giving you time to learn, like the whole like 2 week, 4 week, 6 week, 12 week, whatever plan of like what you should be doing. That doesn't really apply. Like they're looking at you in like quarters or halves of the year, and that's the plan.
And there are some organizations
because
like
you're new.
that,
You're new, right? Yeah, you're new.
And those organizations, to your point, they actually do give you the rope to play with and say, here's the problem, you figure out how to solve it. Thinking through this, NASA springs to mind, right? There's a program at NASA where college graduates are brought in and just given problems, and not necessarily any direction of how to solve it, because they want to tap into some new creativity, right? Some innovation there. But that's very much the exception, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I have a thought. So a couple of actually. So a little bit counter to what you're saying, and that is that, so as a new, for instance, college student coming out, you don't know what you don't know, right? So as your first job, to your point, if you're being hopefully mentored, you're being led, you're being developed.
Hopefully.
Okay. Hopefully. But there's a couple of assumptions there being made. Number one, assuming that the organizations even are mentoring, but are they mentoring? Are they teaching? What are the values and the concepts and the culture in that organization? Because this new person in the job force starting their career, what they're learning here is their first experience and is a baseline for their career, and is what they are assuming is what we're speaking about in regards to product, whether it be product ownership, product management. So, okay, is this really an agile environment, or is it something that is some quasi-agile? So even so, what they're taking on, what they're absorbing, and what they're learning is going to be the baseline of what they assume, at least at this point, is going to follow through with them. So that's point number one.
Yeah.
The other thing I would just say is just to bring this up, and that is that in regards to kind of the after times now, right? So this almost is kind of made sense in the before times. So before COVID, right? When we had mentorship and we had people who were in an office or co-located and had the ability to see, be involved with, absorb through osmosis, and really kind of see experiences, right? Where now they're regulated to intentional half-hour to hour-long meetings and really have a lot of that opportunity to learn and develop taken away.
Yeah.
So that has to be really intentional.
Yeah.
So those are just my couple of points on that.
To the first point, I don't know. I hope you have a good point on this one, because I certainly don't. I was like, the first point I heard that loud and clear is like, is this really agile? Is this really what it's like to be a PM? You know what I mean? In my first role or whatever out of college, hey, I went through school. I went some extra time. I got my MBA. This is what they taught me. I was lucky they didn't teach me about Gantt charts. We'll deal with that one in a separate episode. If you're lucky enough to be paired with people truly get it. I don't know how to describe that one where it comes through. Do the people you're working for truly get it, or are they just trying to tick boxes because you're in some kind of organization where like Agile is just another box to tick or whatever? I think an easy way to figure this out, if you're in this role or you're straight out of college, you're not really sure, you're in your first year, whatever, first 18 months, I don't know, is the person that you're working for, are they, every week that you meet with them, hopefully you meet with them every week, right? Every week you meet with them, are they asking you, how many customers have you talked to? What has the feedback that you've gotten from customers that you talked to this week been? And if they're asking you those questions, you're headed in the right direction. If they're asking you Gantt chart type questions, or like, when's this going to be done? How's this going to be done? That kind of stuff, like, you're in a tough spot. I'm very worried about your future.
You're absolutely right? But as a person coming in their first job, they don't know any better.
How do you know?
They don't know.
They're assuming they're getting what they're hearing, those weekly meetings, which hopefully they are having, whatever they're being asked for or whatever they're being asked to produce. This is their impression of what it is to do it right.
And I don't know where you're gonna go, Om, but I'm cutting in line.
Yeah, go for it.
You're trying to get in the park, and you got your ticket in your hand, and I see you. I'm like, oh, you should get in the park. But I'm cutting right in front of you because I want to say, you think every other company is like this at this point in your career. So you're likely interfacing with engineering managers and whatever, and you're like, how am I gonna get my thing built? I need to talk to these people to get my thing built. Like, you don't have a vision and direction and future of the product and a 5-year plan and all that kind of, like, running a good business, all the stuff that should be coming from you, what you're bringing to the table. This is why this blows my mind so much. Very early in my career, all the QA people did business analysis. So I wrote all the requirements. I did user interviews. I did like all the different ways of interviewing and getting requirements back in the day, right? Like user interviews, technical analysis, deep dives on product, workshops, stuff like that. So this blows my mind that you're going to take somebody out of college, shortcut all that kind of stuff, all those learnings, and say, oh, figure out what the right thing to build is.
Chances are they're not even going to be offered that question, like figure out, go build the right thing. They're probably going to be, to your point earlier, are going to be driven by engineering managers or line managers in a matrixed environment. These managers are focused typically largely on utilization, efficiency, those kinds of measures, right? As opposed to effectiveness, what problems are we solving for our customers? That's unfortunately very common, what I just described. What is very less common is to be given free rein to say, come in and, here's our product line. Figure out who our customers are, or here are the customers, figure out the products that we can fulfill these customers' needs with.
Right.
That's very, very rare, sadly. And a person coming out of college, I don't care, they come from the best business school, right? Been there, done that. They're not in the best position to thrive in that scenario.
Well, let's cut over to the supporting argument, because I feel like we've not represented the supporting argument very well. Like, let's cut over to the supporting argument. Like, is this agile? Let's say you're working for people that eschew traditional waterfall development cycle. They basically have no tolerance for traditional waterfall at all. They only have tolerance for talk to the customer, decide what to do, change your backlog, do that. Right? They're hardcore just to the customer. If you're straight out of college and you work for those type of people, you will get a very customer-centric attitude very quickly, and you'll never have a lot of the problems that we're talking about. The reason I bring this up is because somebody asked me what Agile was, and I stopped for a second because I was like, I don't know how to answer that. That's too basic of a question for me. I don't know how to answer that. I was like, stop the train. I gotta get off. But what I ended up telling him is, I'm going to talk to the customer and ask them what they would like the most. And then I'm going to take that away and work with my development team for 2 or 3 days and see what we can build that supports what they asked for. And then in 2 or 3 days, we'll call the customer back up and show them what we did in 2 or 3 days. And then based on if they like it or not, we'll change what we did and do something else. And then 2 or 3 days, we'll meet with them again. I was like, forget a backlog and forget all that stuff. I was like, I'm going to have one story, and every 2 or 3 days I'm going to meet with the customer and look at what they like about that story or not. And I was like, forget sprints and scaling, and forget all that. I was like, if you can do that, if you can focus on that, just talking to the customer, a couple days, show them something else, talk with them a couple days more, show them something else. I was like, if you can do that, you will be ahead of 95% of the Agile organizations that are doing software development out there if you can just do that. And that was my response to, like, what is Agile? What does that mean? As a product person, what does that mean?
Sounds a lot like some values and principles that happen to come along with, just saying. I heard you saying, literally talking about putting the customer first and feedback loops and, right? That's what I heard you saying.
Yeah.
So how you do that, but keeping those top of minds, that's that mindset.
Yeah, I guess I agree fully with what you said. The only exception to that, and it's really a very exceptional exception, is that a phrase?
It is now.
It is now. So if you're a super visionary
super villain,
super visionary Steve Jobs, you don't ask the customer, you make something because you know there's a need out there, right? You didn't ask anybody before he produced the iPod. He knew there was a need for a portable music device, and he came up with it. Well, he actually wasn't the first one who came out with it. Sony came out with their Walkman first, didn't they? I forget. But anyway.
Sony.
Right? So in this example, that's a rare example where you don't lead with the customer. But 99.9% of the time you do or you should, because you don't know what their needs are. You need to know what their needs are.
But I think, to that point, he did know what the customer's needs are based on his personal. He knew what he wanted and what his friends wanted and what. So, he really did know what was out, what was, even though he wasn't necessarily engaging directly with the customers, he knew what they needed.
Yeah.
I feel because Stormy is here, I feel we should talk about the specific path of breaking into product with domain experience and not having technical experience.
You said you came into the product space from a domain knowledge background, right? And what really kind of catalyzed that move was your penchant. Can I say that word? It's a French word.
Yeah. We love French words.
we love French words for technology, right? So you said you weren't afraid to pull machines apart and together. So that, I think, kind of leveraged your move into this space.
Well, I suppose it's not necessarily cool, but certainly helpful. I mean, to be intimidated by technology, software, I think would put you at a huge disadvantage. And I honestly don't think this is a job that you would probably be searching for if that were the case. I mean, to be very honest, I don't feel like this is something you would be looking for. So yes, that made this an option or created an option or an opening for me. And the fact that there was also some luck and timing there. So I was in healthcare at a huge transitional point where they were needing someone to bridge that gap between the end user and technology, and wanting desperately or seeing applications that were being developed 100% by developers and how horrible they were to utilize when you were actually starting to use them from a workflow perspective as a provider or a user of the healthcare software was using it.
Were you part of the company when they decided that, or was that part of why they reached out to you? Like, what was your role when they decided, like, hey, we really need someone to talk to figure out? Okay.
So when my actually breaking into information technology from actually bedside ICU nursing, right? So there was that stage. Yeah. And that really was my break into healthcare information technology, right? Sure. And I spent several years there. Specialized in a couple of things, became a subject matter expert in voice recognition software, loved that. Did a lot of implementation, and that led me into a couple of other kind of contracting roles and things like that, and implementations into EMRs. And it was kind of this domino effect of experience that led to a different experience, and the willingness of me to say, I'm willing to take this new opportunity, right? So there was taking a chance. Yeah. It's scary when you're going into something new, but the opportunities would come up, or I would seek for an opportunity and be willing to take the chance to take that new opportunity. So that's number one. Number two, which speaking specifically about product, that one had to do with me searching, being out there and available on LinkedIn and saying, hey, looking for my next opportunity. My contract's getting ready to come up to an end. I'd worked 2 years, loved it. And I had a company that said, we really want someone who can empathize and speak to our developers and our other product owners who are coming from the technical space, who are coming from the dev space, who can round out that product team. Right? So like I said, some diligence on my part and really looking and exploring things outside of maybe my comfort zone, a willingness to take a chance, and a little bit of luck there, just finding that opportunity to say, you know what, not only am I willing to take a chance, but somebody else is willing to take a chance on me. That was my break into product, really.
Did you change companies to make that jump? Yes?
I did, yeah. So I had a 2-year long-term contract, which was implementing that voice recognition software across the United States and Canada. So that was successful, coming to an end, ending that on a really high note, and was searching at this point for my next endeavor. And to be very honest, there was a headhunter that I was out there on LinkedIn and definitely putting my name out there. But I guess I had the right keywords and was, what they saw and what I was seeking ended up meeting what they thought were their needs. And I ended up in the final kind of running. I flew out, did the interview when you did those kind of things. Mm-hmm. and I think what was very honest in that interview and saying, this is not something I'm familiar with. Agile is something I'm actually quite unfamiliar with, other than some terminology. I've worked with helping this voice recognition company and developers at the other EMR company I was working with to get together so they could do some integrations. So by proxy, I've learned some things. I've been in a stand-up here and there, but that's it. But what I can bring to you is this knowledge of what needs to happen from an end user perspective. Yeah. And ultimately, they said, that's what we need here. We've got the dev experience. We've got the other people coming from and I was that person that was able to round that out.
Interesting. So coming into a technology company from that perspective and working with other product folks that came from the other side, what were some of the challenges in working together with those folks?
So I would say that initially I felt very much like a fish out of water. I mean, a lot of terminology, nomenclature, things that I wasn't familiar with or comfortable with. That said, I worked with a fantastic team that I was, and I said, as I said in my interview, I was very transparent about where I was coming from, willing to learn, and absolutely ready to jump in and do everything I could to make this, to learn and develop my skills is something I was very interested in. So the fact that I had a team that was aware, right? Also, my fellow product team, as well as the dev team that I was working with and co-located with at that time, very transparent with them. And I had a dev team that was super supportive of me. So there wasn't this line in the sand. You're the product owner. You will be the only one writing any story ever. All acceptance criteria will be on you. So I had a lot of support, but I also was highly engaged with the end users and was able to translate that not only for my team, but for the other product teams. So from a long-term perspective and looking at that roadmap and prioritizing that over the long term, my input was really valuable there. So where my shortcomings were initially, I was able to give a lot of value in other places.
It's interesting because with my current team, I told them where I would like them to get eventually is to a point where I connect them to the business and I bring the business need, and I don't really write any stories. I'm bringing what the business needs. I'm bringing the business problems that need to be solved, and then the team is figuring out how to extrapolate those and break them down and size them correctly and figure out acceptance criteria and all that kind of stuff. I've told my team many times, I eventually look to transition myself out of this role of, oh, Brian does all of the, he'll take a first pass at the acceptance criteria and we'll kind of beat it up and we'll change it. But like, I was like, I want to bring you nothing. I want to bring you, I need this. And then they need to get good at interviewing me and forcing me to get better at interviewing other people, right? Because the ideal situation is I bring the other people directly to the team in one session, and we all interview them together. In a future state, I will hopefully distribute all the skills that I have to the team members, and then I'll just bring the user to the refinements, and we'll all talk together. And there's a bunch of ways that you elicit requirements. That's what they used to call it when we were all business analysts. Yeah,
yes.
Elicit requirements, and we'll figure out what the user wants. But again, my background is coming up from development teams, and then figuring out the domain expertise that I need to build the proper software. Who are the users? What questions do I need to ask? How do I quickly come online to make the most impact in their world? Because I know I live in the software. I will talk to customers, but only so far as I can get what I need to continue building the best product for them. And then I'll visit back with them once we've built something to get their feedback on it. I want to be not really the go-between, because I'm not trying to cut the team off. What I'm trying to say is I don't know what I'm doing with my life. That's what I'm trying to say.
You're just trying to catalyze this whole situation with your team and the clients. And it can be challenging if you don't have a product that is made for just one type of user. Then it can be challenging because the personas, right? So the team is dealing with different ones.
I started hammering the persona with my team because, again, not to go all Mike Miller on everything all the time, but we have one user in mind for our one feature we're building. And one thing comes out of that. You could say, well, it's one user and they're doing one action, but they could take it 3 different ways. I was like, cool. Then we'll build 3 different stories to represent the 3 different ways they could extrapolate what this feature is doing. We're building things for one user. And the idea is, if I'm building things for one user, I want to be able to profile that user. So when I go to invite people to my sprint reviews, the one user is tied directly to the one person at the business level. I can say, hey, this feature is for who is a advocate representative or whatever. And I know that when we're demoing a feature for customer advocate, We know that Ohm is our guy to invite to these sessions, and we can invite him when we're doing a sprint reviews. Hey, Ohm, we've developed this feature for our customer advocates. We think this will help you. Why don't you give us some feedback? We're going to demo some features for you. Just 20, 30 minutes on a call, and that's it. Look, it helps me because we've done this persona exercise. We know who we're developing each feature for. We can take a little more care about who to invite to our sprint reviews. And we use Jira. Well, I haven't done that in a while. And you can add a custom field to Jira that lets you select from a drop down this story, who is the persona associated with the story. And you can just select from the drop down and pick the persona. So instead of writing, as a customer advocate, I want this functionality, whatever, like I can skip that line and I can code it as a drop down to say like, oh, pick my little drop down, and my little drop down says Ohm : customer advocate. As a customer advocate, I want this feature, and then I can kind of skip to the feature. I always approach your ALM tool from the perspective of like, how can it just speed my process along and make things easier, as opposed to normal Jira, which just is
yes. I don't know if anybody. Yeah, I wanted to just a quick add on to what you said, and that is, it's funny because you said the who and the what is literally, I had just written that down, right? So my job from the product management perspective is the who and the what, right? And coming from the healthcare domain, that's really easy for me because I know the who, and if I talk to the who, I can figure out the what. And sometimes I have a general idea of the what anyway, right? What I actually don't have any idea about is the how. So I don't ever have to I don't roll over and start solving issues because I just don't know how to, right? But the other thing I wanted to mention is that you mentioned on multiple times there are different ways of involving your team and how to do that. So one of the things that I was able to do, and I didn't realize how foreign it was. So this is the first team I had ever worked with at this company I was talking to you about earlier. First development team, say co-located, my work family. And so they're developing and I want feedback. So I invited them we were doing some kind of an A/B exercise or something mid-sprint to try to get an idea of what their thoughts were. Invited my entire dev team. I facilitated the meeting, introduced, welcome to ask questions, right, as we went through. They had never, ever, ever been a part of that type of a session where they had first-hand experience with the persona or the end user that was using the application that they were working with. Ever. Yeah. And so they saw them working through and maybe having a trouble finding something or going like, this is confusing. And they might be able to ask a simple question going, I didn't think of that. That makes perfect sense. It was so enlightening. And it was something that we ended up now working into, like to your point, as often as we could when it made sense to make sure they were involved directly with that type of an interaction.
Yeah. I would think that's pretty typical. Regardless of the way you find yourself in product management, whether you find yourself coming from domain expertise or coming with development team expertise, confronting your developers with, you're going to actively shadow a user. And I think of this when I do journey maps, right? I think of this when I do a journey map. And then the experience to them would be, especially for people in organizations where they've never been exposed to that, it's probably really jarring for them in their first experience to be like, oh, I can't believe these people are having such a hard time in this application that I work in all the time. But that's good because they should gain that empathy for the people that are using the software. They should gain that empathy because they're not exposed to that. They're not exposed to anything in the organization that helps them build empathy with the user of the software.
Agreed.
So on that front, right? So we talked about on different podcasts, checkbox Agile.
Yeah.
This is another example of that where teams would say, we're going to consider personas in our ALM tool. Look, there's a little caricature of a person, right? That's Fred or Mary or whoever. And that's the accountant. So we're going to say, as Fred, they do that. But the developers have never spoken with Fred. That's where I feel like we're just checking the box. You may as well not bother because you're not getting the benefit. Very few organizations go to that level where they would say, let's get together in a room and just talk. Just talk about what the real issues are. and not go down this path of, well, these are requirements, we're going to write them down. That's the bruff that we used to do in the old days. Big requirements up front, right? And then get them all signed off. And every time somebody says, it's not quite what we want, go change request, right? Just makes my blood boil. We need to do a better job collectively to make sure we involve the customer with the development team. People say this word, customer-centric. Really put the customer in the center, right? Surround yourself around the customer. And we're not doing a good job of that, sadly.
To your point, that empathy is exactly what all of a sudden, and my developers after the meeting, the initial meeting, were going like, I had no idea that this is something they would struggle with. It made sense to me when I developed it this way. And so it did create that empathy, and and this was a meeting they actually looked forward to, and they knew they would learn so much from. And it was something the other product owners and managers ended up implementing.
I don't know. If I'm going to argue about this one, because I like arguing about things, if I'm going to argue about this one, I would say that the product manager coming with domain expertise over the product manager coming from a background of development expertise and learning the domain, I would think that the product manager coming from the domain and having to learn development expertise would have an advantage here. I would think that they would find an easier time empathizing with the users than the person coming from development teams. I don't know. I'm willing to be challenged on that one, because I also think that the person purely coming from development teams, I would hope would have a certain level of awareness that they're lacking in that knowledge, so they would be open to empathizing. I come at this subject from working with development teams. So I come at the subject saying someone coming from development teams would likely anchor on technical solutions and go straight to solutioning. So maybe they're not the best person to propose solutions. Is the person coming from the domain similar to that, where they would anchor on domain, like, oh, this is the biggest problem in nursing or whatever, and like maybe they're ignoring other things. I don't know. I see both sides. I'm not really sure which one would be better.
I think one side is more likely than the other. So if you're coming from the dev side, so you understand the technology, so you're centered along those lines. And before you hear and really understand the problem, to your point, you start forming a solution. I think the other way around is less likely. You come from a domain, you understand the pain points, you're not necessarily going to do anything equivalent, right? You're just simply going to want a solution that is fit for purpose for the pain. So I think coming from that side, as you did, you're not likely to say, I need this client-server arrangement, right? 'Cause you don't care about the technology. You just want a solution.
And the simplest solution. So MVP was definitely something that we want the simplest solution that can give us working software, some benefit to the customer as quickly as possible, right? So then and iterate on that. But to your point, I think that there's bias. You're going to come with bias from both sides. You're going to have so I think that the most important piece to that is, and you mentioned this as well, is just being self-aware of that and being aware that you're going to be coming with bias, and being self-aware and open and honest with yourself as much as you possibly can, right? We're all biased, we're all human, and being open and willing to learn.
What is the difference between product manager and product owner to you, Stormy? Like, let's go down that road before we run out of time.
So I'll start with product owners, because that's where I started. That was my original title. So a product owner is a term coined in the Scrum Guide. That's where this title came from, right? Product owner. And so there wasn't a product manager actually at that point. The product owner was the product, right? The product owner, the product manager, all of the above, right? So SAFe, if I'm not mistaken, and you could challenge me on this, I wouldn't put down $100 on this, but I believe it was SAFe that came up with the product manager and ended up separating these two pieces or these two roles out, right?
I really have no idea.
And actually at this point, the Scrum Guide and the 2020 Scrum Guide they're not roles anymore. Right, so exactly.
Call them account.
Yes. So they're not actually roles anymore.
That sounds like something meant to sell something to someone.
But my point is, so once a product manager came in, that was actually ended up being defined and separated out. So my best kind of Cliff Notes understanding of this is the product owner would be the SME for the application and or the feature or whatever it is they were responsible for, and they would be the translator between that persona or user group and the development team. They would be working hand in hand with the development team, a development team. They're part of that team along with the Scrum Master. They are the Scrum team, right? The product manager, on the other hand, was more along the portfolio manager. So they may have multiple product owners working with them, not under them, although that has been misconstrued in my opinion, but initially it was working with them, potentially with different features, but under the same portfolio. That product manager would be then responsible for understanding the market drivers of the customer, which would be driving the overall customer needs, not necessarily the individual features, which those priorities might change, but that then would drive the long-term roadmap and prioritization of that. So I think that's the differentiation I see, is where the product manager typically is more involved with leadership, marketing, sales, and overarching market trends, where the product owner, now that there's a separation between the two, is more involved with maybe specific product and or feature, and very involved with the teams regarding that.
Yeah. Not to, again, reference Mike Miller twice in the same podcast, but the distinction I have lines up with his distinction, which is the product owner is inwardly, organizationally focused in towards the development team. Product manager is focused externally from the organization, externally out to the customers and whatnot. So one person talks outward about the features, one person talks inwardly about the features. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
I feel like I'm missing a big...
I don't think the two of you are saying anything radically different. I'm going to try and use an example for this. So you think about products like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, right? Each of these products may have a product owner that's working with one or more development teams to produce that product, to deliver the product. Now, all of these products, not all, but a lot of these products are bundled under Microsoft Office, where you may have a product manager who is accountable for P&L of Microsoft Office, and they're trying to figure out how to position that in the market with competition, et cetera, et cetera. So to your point, Brian, that might be the outward focus rather than looking inward towards the dev team, because you've got the product owner handling that side of things. So I think that example kind of illustrates what you were saying and what you were saying, both, right? I think that's true. And Mike Miller's example, and I've talked to Mike several times about this, it's similar. He's thinking about it from a similar standpoint. It's not that a product manager has no idea about how things are being developed, or it's not that a product owner has no idea about where this overall product is in the market. It's just that their accountabilities are different, right?
Yeah, right.
That's how I feel.
I would say the granularity is a bit different. So where I'm thinking about this is, so from a product owner perspective, that doesn't exclude you from working out externally outside of the company. As a matter of fact, I would be expecting that a product owner would be working with personas and end users relevant to the application that there are features, so on and so forth, that they're working on. Right. So they could be working and prioritizing appropriately for their development teams. That said, they would be working maybe more so with those end users utilizing Excel, right? Where a product manager might be working with the company leadership that would be purchasing the enterprise software portfolio of Microsoft Office to be utilized. You know what I mean? So I think there's some granularity there, but there is definitely communication and collaboration that should be happening and overlap between the PO and the PM.
We're kind of thinking about the external versus internal product cycle when we're dividing the role of this is the way I don't know. I only bring up Mike's opinion because that's one opinion, right? When people ask me this, my opinion is you should keep the two together. You're like, you just call him product manager and be done with it. To keep the two roles together until your organization gets big enough where it's just too much context switching to keep the two roles together. Where there's so much chatter happening external to the organization and so much chatter happening internal to your organization that it's not possible for one person to live in both the spaces. And then it makes sense to separate the role of the product manager versus product owner. I don't know. Even when I say it, I am only tentatively, behind what I'm saying, because I'm like, I don't know. Like, you can scale your organization to a point where your product owners / managers never get overwhelmed because you're scaling their little pieces of the business and their teams responsibilities and stuff. If you get to a point where, without using any titles at all, a certain group of product people are only dealing with external facing, and a certain group of product people are only dealing with internal facing.
Yeah, that hard delineation is probably not.
Yeah,
you're gonna create silos at that point.
That's where I'm going. I'm like, you're probably very quickly coming to a point where you're recreating silos. And I don't think that's a good thing. If you're a product person, I don't know, owner, manager, doesn't matter. There's a certain point of tactics and strategy involved. Like, every product owner who has one and only one team, 2 teams, doesn't really matter. You have a point where you're plugging your team into the strategy, organizational strategy, high level, 5 years, 6 months, anywhere in between. But as a product person, you're plugged into the next 2 sprints ahead of where you're at. So 6 weeks out, right? That's where you live. You live sprint N plus 2. Mm-hmm. That's where your backlog extends. Past that, who knows? We can throw everything out. Doesn't really matter. That's a very tactical world to live in, is sprint N plus 2. I'm going to do all my backlog sessions, all my interviews, all my team reviews and story building and breaking down epics and stuff like that in sprint N plus 2. And certainly there is a need for that. There is certainly a need for that. But that product person who's living in that small tactical world should be able to extend themselves to connect with the strategy to bring it into the world of sprint N plus 2.
Yep, that's where the product backlog comes into play. Sure, they're looking at it from a kind of a micro lens of sprint N plus 2. Yep. But that chunk of work belongs on their product roadmap somewhere. It's not just completely random, right? Yeah. It's still contributing to the original vision.
Well, that's my point. That they have to lobby for what is coming up in the strategy to change it. And they have to have a say, because they live in the tactical world. So they should have a say, even if they don't make concrete changes. They should have a say to say, hey, if you do this, this is what's going to happen at a tactical team level. Yeah. So that the organization can knock down risks.
Well, it's also, yes, I agree. And also it's that they're the ones that can see the blind spots. Because if you're really living up here at a higher level, strategic level, you're not really aware of the blind spots. An example might be, there might be a regulatory change that the strategic folks aren't necessarily aware of. Yeah. But these guys will say, we can't do this because... or PR or something. So people can see that and say, yeah, we get what we have to do, but we have to pivot now, right? Those micro pivots, they happen, right? Yeah. But they can't just say, oh, we're going to work on something else altogether. That's currently not on the roadmap. They can't do that. That doesn't make sense. That's chaos at that point.
Yeah.
So I'd say that when I hear you saying these things, there should be some alignment here. When we're talking tactical, I totally get this N plus 2. That makes perfect sense, right? But ultimately, to your point, should be tied into strategy, which, in my mind, comes from, if we're moving bottom to top, sprint goal into product goal, which should be tied to our organization mission, values, and all those. Yeah. So ultimately, I mean, even tactically, we should be able to tie those to our overall mission of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we all got to be on the same page. Like, how do we knock down these problems? Well, in the short term, in the next 2 sprints, if I'm doing 2-week sprints, in the next month, the way I can deal with these problems is, well, I can deal with these things and they're very quick, but they're not a permanent fix. The permanent solution is usually much, much larger, right?
Yeah.
And I like to get into the how. That's one of my coming from a dev team comeuppance. What's a good
word is good.
Coming from a dev team background.
Comeuppance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comeuppance.
I mean,
Like,
sure.
I like to get into the how. If we're going to do something, how are we going to do it? I like to get into that at least a fair bit to make sure that the team understands the goal of where we're going. That's probably the detriment to anyone who comes up to product management from the dev teams. Is like, number one, you need to abandon analysis at some point. Just be like, this is it. This is the cutoff of analysis. I'm out. Like, I've done enough analysis. And the other point is you need to get out of the business of how and technology solutions, the very specific solutioning of things, how UIs are built. That's something I'm like, I hate all UIs. I've designed web pages. I've designed web application solutions. So like, I generally know what is quick changes and what is not. So when we're going through and doing like story pointing, for example, it's like, oh, this is like an 8. I'm like, is it an 8? Like, you're just changing some colors. Why is this an 8? I guess I bring this up to say there are different things that I will challenge because I came up from being on development teams. Comeuppance. That's a terrible phrase. That maybe if you came up through the business domain and you didn't have expertise in development, you would never think to challenge. You would never think to say like, oh, why you guys been working 3 days to make a change to this drop down or whatever? Why does it take you 3 days? Add an option, give it an ID, and you're done.
It's good and bad. I mean, I understand coming from a business lineage. Comeuppance.
You could say that.
Yes, coming from that background, it's very difficult to kind of extract yourself out of that mode of thinking. This should only take so many seconds, or this is easy to do.
Yeah.
Right. That's one thing. The other thing is getting to the point where you let go. Let go of that. You're not in that role anymore.
Yeah.
You're not developing software anymore.
Right.
That is so difficult, I found, right? That is very hard. So the thing I wanted to talk about there just really briefly is sometimes the developers will surprise you. So when you say to them, I want to change the color of this, and you say it's a 3-point story or 5-point story, really it should just be an hour at the most, right? And they'll say, well, no, one of the things I want to do as part of that is to make sure that it's, ADA compliant or whatever the term is, W3A, right?
Right, yeah.
And, I didn't think of that, but they did. So that's where you kind of just go so far and then just let them have it. Trust them with it.
We're going to argue
hard.
about this one, though. Like, trust them with it, but also shouldn't we negotiate that and document what we agree on in the acceptance criteria?
Absolutely.
Because I might not care. I might be like, listen, we'll deal with compliance and we'll deal with what is the term for
Accessibility?
accessibility? Yeah, that's the term. Yeah, we'll deal with accessibility 2 sprints from now when we deal with the whole site, and we try to flatten the whole site for accessibility. And I have a whole story for that. And I promise I will create a whole story for that and deal with it in one go. But right now, we're just trying to demo the site to try to sell it or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course. So in that case, if there's a deliberate plan to address that specific thing, sure, yes, absolutely. My example was more about something that wasn't thought about, and they actually came up with the idea. And in that case, you either say, that was a good idea, but not now, right? We'll pull it later or whatever.
Yeah.
But just the point I'm making is it's hard for people that came from a technology background to just walk away from that and let go and relinquish controls in many ways.
I think the harder point in this is because I think the skill to challenge the team to say, hey, I agree with you, that is important, but it's not important to deal with now. I'm going to take it and move it over here and we'll deal with it later. That skill set, I think, transcends anything we're talking about today. I think there's a future podcast on this specific topic about, because like human nature, you don't want to stand in front of the tribe and be like, oh, like all y'all are wrong and I'm the only one that's right. You don't want to call out everyone and be like, and challenge a large number of people being the only person. There probably are people that have no problem doing that, but you don't do it all the time. You certainly don't. I certainly don't do it. I have no problem doing that, but I won't do it all the time. I will pick and choose those battles. But also, when you're doing it, you're kind of fighting against your human nature. There's the thing about the only time in your human caveman nature that you alone have to deal with a large group of people that are opposing your point of view is like when you're being judged by the tribe, and your life might be in danger when you're being judged by the tribe. So it's very difficult to deal with that situation when you're being judged by a large group of people, to be the only person to be like, no, everyone's wrong and I'm right. But you might be right. You might be like, here's my evidence. And you actually might be the only person out of that group that has gathered evidence to prove or disprove, right? Or whatever. Nobody else in the whole group might have they might not know at all. They might have no opinion. They might have no opinion on the matter at all. But you as a product person has to bring the evidence that supports an opinion. And then people can pick apart that or not. But again, we go back to, I don't even want to challenge the group because they might vote me off the island or whatever.
Yeah, well, you succumb to groupthink, or you don't feel confident.
It's super tough
in yourself to be able to stand up to everybody and say you're wrong and I'm right, kind of thing, right? There's that too.
So I think that has a lot to do with culture and trust. And if you are comfortable with disagreement of your ideas, then you should also be comfortable with disagreeing with others. So it becomes this very, very integrated into the culture. So I will say, from my perspective, coming from the domain perspective, from the healthcare domain, that I've never had the issue of delving into the how, because it wasn't something I ever stepped into because I didn't know how to, right? It literally wasn't. It's something I wanted to learn about, and I certainly would ask questions. But when we're getting into microservices and all these databases and all these Kubernetes and Mongo and all these things, so I mean, they'll tell me what I need to know and give me the Cliff's Notes version so I can understand high level. But I never got into the how because I didn't know how to. And I think, to my perspective, that was an advantage. That said, there's some potentially disadvantage too with coming in with domain expertise and thinking that what's best potentially, right? Okay. And leading and guiding, right? Where maybe you aren't as open-minded as you thought you were. So I think the same trap could be had on both sides of that coin. And again, coming back to self-awareness, being open, having that conversation, and having the trust and confidence and safety within your team or organization to hear feedback contrary and to give contrary feedback, and have the respect of the individuals to hear and receive that. And also, one last thing, and that is, you said saying yes, right, or no. So for instance, you said, hey, accessibility, yes, but, love that one. Or no, but, right, no, not right now, right? So those are really powerful, right? Yes, but.
Yeah. Well, all that kind of stuff relies on you having and painting a vision.
What's more common is, in reality, it could be your vision as a strong product person,
right?
And they don't really have that same vision, right? So fortunately for you, it's gone up and come back down.
Yeah, that's fine.
In other cases, it doesn't go up.
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for disaster.
That is a problem. Yeah, well, everything we've just run through, like, nobody can help with that problem. Whether you've come in with domain expertise, whether you've come in through development, whether you've come in straight college or whatever, doesn't really matter how you got into it. You've just adopted a problem, organizational problem. You now have to climb through the organization, regardless of your background, to figure out who you can climb to solve that problem. And it's going to be a problem for you until you resolve it. And it's not a director of development, it's not an individual team member, it's not an individual product owner, it's not any of those people's responsibility. It's your responsibility now as a product person to climb up in the organization to make sure you've aligned on vision, and then make sure that vision pours down, cascades down, waterfalls down. I don't know.
No waterfalls.
Yeah.
And say too that, you know what, so this also comes with experience. So, and it's not going to be completely clear as soon as you started an organization. This is going to take some time to unfold and realize that this is even a problem. And then additional time potentially to go, what opportunities do I have to potentially solve this, and who can I collaborate with? And this could be a very fine line to walk in an organization if you're dependent on the type of organization and a hierarchy there. So
I agree. A lot depends on the culture. Some
experience there could be very well.
Keep that resume updated. I have a parting question. My question is, what is the one piece of advice you give yourself to your younger self, let's say 5 years ago?
5 years ago.
Or you pick a time frame.
Yeah, no, the one thing I would give, a piece of advice I would give myself, I would say from a career, well, I would say two things. So personally, I would give myself two pieces of advice, one for personal and one for career, right? Mm-hmm. I know this is very kumbaya and kind of hippie-ish, but I'm realizing now I'm in my mid-40s and have been really ambitious and now have an adult child and a 23 and 15-year-old daughters. And I've spent a lot of time in my career and concentrating on that. And so self-care and taking time with your family is so important. I realize how important it is to take care of our families financially and but taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families. So from that personal perspective, I would tell myself 5-10 years ago, pay more attention because it goes by quickly. And I know that sounds so cliche, but I really would say that to myself.
It's very true. So
professionally, I would say something very different to myself 5 years ago than I would say to myself a year or 2 years ago. So the before times versus the now times, right? So, but I would venture to develop strong, lasting, professional relationships with people that you look up to and respect. I only have a couple in my career, but they have been absolutely invaluable to me. And now someone who is a close and personal friend of mine, but someone I worked at a large organization who at that point was my leader and mentor, continues to be a mentor of mine now, almost 10 years later, but Francesca Bigert, and she's just been absolutely fantastic, and what a fantastic leader, and somebody I still will reach out to and go, hey, am I going in the right direction here? Really, so create those relationships when you can find them, people that are true leaders and not just managers.
Awesome.
Find them and develop those.